shortage of eccentric guests in the mayor's office in Lowell. I should know I was one of them for 2 years. One of those guests had actually come to my office and brought what he had described as the solution to our traffic congestion problems here in the city. You'll notice the innovative cutting off of all the corners on the intersection to facilitate right-hand turns. You might think this is crazy, but this is actually what we've done in our city. So I listened to the man. I politely copied all of his plans for solving traffic congestion, and then filed them in the appropriate receptacle. But this must have been what the city manager here in the city of Lowell thought of me when I came here last December saying I had solved the issue of the Lord overpass in the city of Lowell. I don't have the plans for that anymore because I think they were filed by himself in the same receptacle. But one of the great people that came to visit me and routinely would communicate with me is a fellow by the name of Le Chiron. He's legally changed his name to Le Chiron. He lives over on Franklin Street. And I get maybe 100 messages, voicemail messages from him each day. And every other day I might get an envelope from him that has a brief message on the back and then paper inside that's completely empty. But this is a postcard that I now keep on my refrigerator. The progress of humanity is measured by the concessions that the folly of the wise makes to the wisdom of the crazy. One of his great insights is actually his idea of average trip distance space theory. The idea is he later developed a theory of everything that I haven't the time to go through, but the idea of the ATD space theory is that we need to live in closer proximity to where we work and where we play. Similarly, this is Jaime Lerner. He was the mayor of Curitiba in Brazil. He had this idea of a turtle design that the purpose of a city is to concentrate the components of civic life, of work and home spaces within close proximity, and that we ought to then design places not for cars, but for people. This is John Dewey's quote, "A problem well defined is a problem half solved." So the problem here is that we don't have a number of these places where we can work and live and play all in the same area. Another one of these problems is more of a metaphysical one, and that is that people aren't being taught this in our schools. This is a cartoon that the experienced traffic engineer Ian Lockwood, with whom I worked at the Mayor's Institute of City Design in Charleston, South Carolina, he had done. Unfortunately, this cartoon isn't a joke because my godson, who lives in the Highlands, goes to school in the Highlands, he wanted to ride his bike to school every day with his mother. He was actually told, as a matter of policy, that he can't do that because the streets are too dangerous to be able to ride your bike there. So what he learns is that the 9-year-old pedaling his way to the school 7/10 of a mile away is the issue, not the people racing in their cars to work in the morning. This is another significant problem in our city. It's the Lowell Connector. In the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and on, all kinds of cities faced this type of problem, the accommodation of the car over people. And what we had then is the introduction of highways to cities. This opened in 1962. When it opened, it was promised by all the business interests, by public officials, and by the traffic engineers that it would create all kinds of jobs and development. But what we got is actually this. We got, I can find about 3 cars on the actual road. One is in the middle of the median, and then over to the, I don't know what's going on there, but over to the right, you see where all the cars eventually end up. What it did was it degraded all the area around the highway like a corridor. It degraded our environment, both built and natural environment. And it reduced the kind of places where people actually wanted to live. And so we have a plan now in the city that preserves this in place, because it really never identified the highway, this highway, is being responsible for everything around it. And so the plan is really only to slightly modify the Lowell Connector, and in doing so, we won't have gotten those promises followed through on. This just shows you how much of a really disconnector the Lowell Connector is. Not only does it not work for cyclists or pedestrians, which we would expect, it doesn't work for cars either, because you can go from one place on Cambridge Street that's just a couple of 100 yards away and travel more than a half a mile. And the point is that we don't have to live with this. This is another cartoon by the traffic engineer, Ian Lockwood, that talks about the capacity of the street. A traffic engineer will almost always talk about the level of service for cars. But we have to begin to imagine streets as having a capacity for so much more. What you see here on the right, being able to have exchange. We had a speaker earlier talk about restoring human connections. This is where we would start, I think. The idea that traffic is a liquid is what leads to all kinds of issues. We have people that talk about, well, because traffic is a kind of liquid, that if you increase the container, you will reduce congestion. And we've tried this all over the country, and it's never worked. When you think more of traffic as a gas, you begin to look at all the other kinds of things that streets can provide in the city. And they significantly impact public health and safety. We heard earlier too about the violence in the city. This is a place to start restoring those human connections. Driving in a car can be a very isolating event. It reduces the number of interactions that you have in any given trip. And so what you have is a decline in social trust between people and between even neighbors. When we talk about reintroducing the concept of community policing to our city, we have to think also about who are the police on the street going to be interacting with. If nobody's on the street and most of the community is in their cars, there's no potential there for it to actually be effective. But we know that good street design can actually create safer places. They can create better built and natural environments. They can increase property values and economic development, provide the foot traffic that's necessary for growing all kinds of retail and restaurant businesses, both here in the downtown and in the neighborhoods. And it can not only through reduced commute times give people the time to participate civically, it also creates a situation where people actually care about their street, they care about where they live, and they care about the people that they live with. So we can increase civic involvement as well. And finally, good street design will increase justice and freedom for all its users. Young, old, disabled, and disadvantaged, no matter what the mode of transportation is, whether it be by bike or foot or bus or trolley. So what can we do? Well, luckily we have a few examples. This is the Embarcadero Freeway in San Francisco. They had been thinking for a number of years that they'd like to take it down, and then an earthquake helped them with that decision. But this is what resulted. This is in Seoul, Korea, where we had one of their highways was actually removed, and in its place we restored daylighted a river and restored a habitat that's fit for humans. This is in Curitiba, Brazil, where the mayor was, like myself at times, called crazy for wanting to pedestrianize one of the major arterial roads in the middle of the city. And shopkeepers and everybody kind of pushed back against that until they realized, after it was done in 72 hours, until they realized that people actually prefer to be out and walking, and that it's good for business. This just reinforces the point that highways and highway-like streets don't belong in cities. The highway is a significant problem, and footbridges don't help it. In fact, the only benefit you can really see to it is that this fella has a bit of shade as he runs underneath it. This is a different kind of overpass. This is the Lowell overpass I referenced earlier. And it's a significant barrier to economic development and to a better city. What's been proposed here is that we have access to a new judicial center. That would be a Jackson Street extension into an intersection here, but all it's doing is really adding to the confluence that already exists. And one of the main problems about it is that it's not the $15 million that's going to be spent on it. That's not the issue. It's that it will be spent in a way that damages our city, and it causes long-term effects. It preserves this entire corridor that's a result of the Lowell Connector and the highway, and separates our neighborhoods, keeps people from moving freely between the downtown and the adjacent neighborhoods, the Acre and the Lower Highlands. So that it'll never be the project that people are promising, unless we do something different. It's also never going to actually deliver on what people have asked for. People were asked to find what the biggest problem for pedestrians is in the city, and they overwhelmingly were able to define the problem. Unfortunately, the traffic engineers were not. This is my little updated sketch that I did that really addresses the concentrating of traffic along a 4-lane Dutton-Thorndike corridor, and instead treats traffic as a gas and separates out the confluence that exists at that intersection. It thinks about streets as an entire network so that traffic can be diffused throughout the network, that you have a couple of different ways to get in and out of the city, that you have more options, and that actually create economic opportunities. In the red, you have more opportunities to create development. In the green, you have open space. But what you do is you create a more walkable environment, because the problem that was defined was not access to a judicial center, but was in creating a better district in a better city. This is just a closer up version to show you the restoration of what has been the traditional street network design in the area. And as French socialist said, progress of humanity is measured by the concessions that the folly of the wise makes to the wisdom of the crazy. This isn't necessarily a crazy idea. That there are ways to do it. It will take a lot of resources, but mostly it takes vision, because the impact that it can have in the long term is well worth it. So where do we go from here? Well, we can start to adopt a complete street strategy that supports all modes of transportation, active, public, and otherwise. That we jumpstart a sustained public involvement in an education process to show more possibilities and develop vision for each street and how it fits into the wider street network. And then we test each project or policy change for whether the proposal contributes or adds to our long-term community vision of creating a great place to live and work and learn and raise a family. And finally, after we've completed the project, we can measure it. We can measure the street performance not just by the number of cars that are allowed to pass in an hour, by all the other things that we know that streets have the capacity to do. This is a picture from Merrimack Street here in the city. As you can see, we have a system, streetcar system that 80 years ago was torn out, and now we're trying to restore it. What I'd like to just propose is that this is not, well, where we are now is not the natural order of things. We didn't get here by some kind of natural evolution. We got here because of a number of different decisions, because of the infrastructure that we have, not only physical and built, but legal, social, economic, political, all that are interrelated and that have been decided and designed in a way that's been mostly haphazard. So that we have now the logical response to all of those collective decisions. But one of the other things that I'd like to say is that new technology and new designs based around that technology is not always an idea worth spreading. We saw it with the introduction of cars and then all the accommodations that were made thereafter that have destroyed our cities throughout the country and in some cases parts of Europe. So sometimes it's important to draw upon your past to be able to lead to a better future. And so, as I said in my final formal remarks as your mayor of the city of Lowell, when we build a city for our children, we will have built a better city for everyone. I thank you very much.